Welcome. In this recording, we're going to discuss the SWOT analysis as well as the VRIN model for assessing sustainable resources. As we begin here, the SWOT analysis is a very common tool that's used. It's very practical. It's one that is taught through pretty much every level of business, and it's a very useful tool. It's great because of its simplicity, but also because its realistic nature, and it gives us a very dynamic right now perspective of what's going on in the firm. So for SWOT, it's asking what are the firm's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so the SWOT, and many of you have seen this before, but the SWOT represents those first letters of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. As we see discussed here, the strengths and weaknesses really are more focused at the value chain level, and they're looking at resources within the company. This is an internal analysis of what's going on in the firm. Whereas the opportunities and threats are more external focused, and we'll build back on some of that previous analysis that you've done at the industry and competitive level with your Pestel environment and your Porter's Five Forces environment analyses. Now, the implications of SWOT analysis really go to a firm level when we're looking at strategic decision making. And when we look at this, what we're trying to do is then match the strengths and weaknesses that a company has with the different opportunities or threats that are out there to identify the best path forward. So again, while it can be a simple model, it can be very effective. And let's briefly look at a couple of these things, just making sure we're clear on the definition and what we're meaning by this. When we're looking at strengths, we're trying to identify the different resource strengths or the competitive capabilities, meaning you're at a competitively superior position than somebody else. And so a strength is something that you're doing well or something that gives you enhances your competitiveness. And so we look at some practical examples here on this slide. We see things like intangible assets for Coca-Cola. So brand name, right? That's something that builds to them, definitely a strength. Valuable competencies, know-how, Southwest Airlines, their internal dynamics and ability for quick turnaround times. Nike, their cooperative ventures that they have, many of this hub and spoke system that they've built for high productivity across the world for production. All those would need different types of strengths. When we're looking at weaknesses, now we're looking at something that we think of a weakness as just something we're bad at, and yes, that can be part of it. It can be something we do poorly. But it can also look at other things. So maybe something that you don't have, and because you have that, it's putting you at a weakness. Or some condition that's placing you at a weakness. Maybe it's poor product positioning. Maybe it's poor physical geographic positioning relative to your competition. And because of that, all of a sudden that places you at a weakness. So these resource weaknesses, or they can put us at relate to deficiencies and maybe our expertise, lack of exact assets, maybe physical organizational assets, personnel, or totally missing capabilities. And as we identify these weaknesses, now we're trying to look at how can we either compensate with what we have or recognize that we're at a competitive disadvantage because of that weakness, and what are the things we must either acquire or put into place to remove that weakness. So the third and fourth of these, so those are the internal focus. The third and fourth are the opportunities and threats. And now we're turning our focus from we've identified these strengths and weaknesses to what new things are emerging out there in the environment that we can take advantage of. How do we capitalize on our strengths to really obtain those opportunities that are out there better than our competition? Or fourth, the threats. How do we identify the threats, whether it's competitive threats, maybe it's environmental threats that we can control. Maybe it's threats that are out there that are beyond our control that we have to adapt to. And so we may say, if we are, let's look at random lawn equipment. So if we're a producer of lawn equipment, if we're John Deere, we may be looking and saying, okay, in the future, right now, we are a dominant player, a name brand, but how are we going to adapt to a move to more and more electric vehicles? Is that going to infiltrate, and it's already started to a little bit, but into our very high-powered lawn equipment manufacturing, and how do we address that now as a potential threat down the road and capitalize either on our strengths that we have or find new ways to bring things in? And can we then view that as either a threat or potentially an opportunity if we're well positioned to defend against it? Okay, so that brings us to the VRIN discussion. In our VRIN discussion, the goal of VRIN is to analyze the different resources in a company and to determine what's their what's their utilization? How well are they serving us, or are they serving us? And so this involves looking at 4 different criteria, and the VRIN stands for valuable, rare, difficult to imitate, and non-substitutable. And so let's briefly go through this. And what you can do in a company is you first come up with your list of here are our many different resources that we might have. Here are different capabilities that we might have. And now after we look at all of these, then we may say, okay, we go through each one and we try to assess each one of the 4 criteria and say, first, is this valuable? And so, is this valuable? Does it exploit an opportunity? Is it putting us at an advantage? Or is it valuable in that it's averting a threat, averting a problem, and helping us, protecting us against that? That would be defining as value. Second, is it rare? Do many other companies have this resource or capability? Third, is it hard for somebody else to imitate? So even if they don't have it, if it is rare, what makes this something that other people can't replicate? And so there's 4 main ways for a resource to be, or a capability to be difficult to imitate. The first is that it would be physically unique. So it's something that you've somehow either patented, or something that maybe it's based on a raw material that's difficult to acquire. And now because of that, you have a physically unique resource that is difficult for somebody else to replicate. Second way to make something difficult to imitate is what we call path dependency. Path dependency means that this resource or capability is something that's accumulated over time. We've built it, and somebody can't just do a turnkey operation to mimic it. We talked about Southwest Airlines a minute ago, when one of their features for a long time they were leading the industry was in turnaround time. How quickly we get planes after they've landed on the ground to where they're back in the air, with all the different things of fuel and cleaning and passengers offboarded and onboarded and everything else. And they were leading in the industry for years and years and years. And many companies tried to replicate exactly what they were doing, and over and over and over, they were not able to do so. And ultimately, it came down to just understanding that this is something that they had accrued over many years of experience. It had been embedded in the culture and become now a path-dependent resource for somebody else to copy. A third way to make a resource difficult to imitate is what we call causal ambiguity. Now, causal ambiguity is whenever there's a resource that somebody else is trying to mimic, but they just can't quite figure out. It's too confusing, or there's too much going on. They can't quite figure out exactly how to recreate that. It's very complex. Many times it's maybe something that's webbed into relationships, and it could be networks, it could be distribution relationships, or it could be physical things that other people just don't have access to be able to see within a plant, or internal dynamics. All of that could contribute to causal ambiguity. And the fourth way to make a resource or capability difficult to imitate would be what we call social complexity. This is going to be maybe a trust between a buyer and a supplier, maybe a trust between a consumer and the organization, interpersonal relationships, a culture, a reputation. These are the social dynamics that have built that are now putting a company at an advantage over its competition. Okay, so we've talked about the first 3 of valuable, rare, difficult to imitate. The fourth thing we'll evaluate resources on is non-substitutability, or the ability to substitute. Now, first we must define a substitute. A substitute is something that will fill the same need as your resource or capability, but comes from outside the industry. And so I like to use a very blatant example. If we were to say Coca-Cola, what's a substitute for Coca-Cola? Well, some people may immediately say Pepsi. Well, that's incorrect. Pepsi would be a competitor of Coca-Cola. So if Coca-Cola and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper, Schweppes, and if these are the competitors, then what's a substitute? Well, ultimately, we need to decide what is the need that this soft drink is fulfilling. If it's caffeine, if that's the need it's fulfilling for some people, then a substitute, a rival would be other carbonated soft drinks. A substitute would be an energy drink or coffee or something else providing that caffeine high. If it's just thirst, then of course it opens it up to many other types of things, whether it's sports drinks or water or whatever else. And so after we define what the industry is, that's when we can determine, is this substitutable by something else? So after we've understood these 4 different criteria for evaluating resources, if we look and we say, you know what, we have this resource in a company and it doesn't meet any of these criteria. It's not valuable. It's not rare. It's easy to imitate, or nobody wants to, or it's easily substituted. that would put us at a competitive disadvantage to our competition. And we want to find a way to discharge, get rid of resources and capabilities like that because they're sucking value out of the company. Now, the second would be able to say, yes, this resource or capability is valuable, but it's not rare because maybe everybody else has it, or it's not difficult to imitate because they can copy it quickly if they want to, or they can easily substitute it with something else. In that case, we have one check mark with our, yes, it's valuable, the rest it's not, but still, that's putting us at competitive parity. This is where most of the resources and capabilities in a firm would fall, right? You don't get competitive advantage on all of your different resources or capabilities. It's usually just a small number, even one or two, that put you at an advantage. But you still have to have many other resources and capabilities in place in the organization that help us tread water, help us make sure that we are keeping up with competition. And that's where the vast majority of your resources and capabilities will fall. If you can answer that, yes, it's valuable and it's rare, and or that it's and then also difficult to imitate or non-substitutable, then now we're looking at resources that may fall into some type of competitive advantage. So either a temporary competitive advantage where if they could easily imitate it or substitute it, may be temporary for a short period of time before somebody else can do it. Or if it matches all four of these, then it could be a sustainable competitive advantage that we would have in place. So again, whenever you're running through your analysis of this, you are going to want to come up with this, maybe 6 to 10 different key resources or capabilities within the company you're looking at, and then analyzing them on how do these capabilities or resources match up compared to competition in the industry on each of these 4 different criteria.